It's the week ending Saturday, the 16th of December, and this is The Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen party rebels ruining Theresa May's latest Brexit bill, President Trump's candidate Roy Moore defeated in the race to be Alabama's next senator, and the Geminid meteor shower making its annual light show across our skies. But we're here to bring you some of the stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the week. Well, I think we already know what the most significant story of the week is, and that's people should turn down music at Christmas parties, and I would have my voice by now. Nonetheless, joining me from the week's digital team are Arion, McNicoll, Rebecca Gillie, and Cameron Tait, and they've all flagged up different stories. Starting the show this week, it's Rebecca. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
Playground bullies could learn a thing or two from the internet.
What do they say to you?
They make fun of my nose. They call me ugly. They say I have no friends.
What'd they do to you at lunch?
Poured milk on me and put a hand down my clothes. Threw bread at me.
Is it just you?
Yep.
Or is it other kids too that feel that way?
Say it's other kids too.
How's that make you feel?
I don't like that they do it to me, and I for sure don't like that they do it to other people, because it's not okay. People that are different don't need to be criticized about it, because it's not their fault.
That was schoolboy Keaton Jones speaking to his mother in a video widely shared on social media this week. Rebecca, how did this video get so big, and what was the initial impact of it?
It was posted on Facebook by the boy's mother, Kimberly Jones, on Friday. I think it started going viral over the weekend. Eventually made its way to Twitter, where it got picked up by a lot of A-list celebrities, including Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, Justin Bieber, Jennifer Lopez. Lots of celebrities reached out and offered him all manner of things: tickets to concerts, sports events, offers of going to film premieres, etc. And it prompted a lot of people to come out on social media and share their own experiences of being bullied as children and offer messages of support to other young people.
So it's a feel-good story.
Yes, at first.
No?
No. And then what happened was basically he got milkshake ducked, which is a phenomenon we've talked about on the podcast before. Basically, it's a Twitter joke about a fake viral story about a duck that drinks milkshake. Everyone loves the duck, and then it turns out the duck's racist and everyone turns on the duck. Basically, this is what happened. Some photos were found on his mother's Facebook account of her posing with a Confederate flag, other family members posing with Confederate flags. Then there was...
Hold on.
Yeah.
So what?
Well,
I mean, even if he does have a racist mum, so what? Why is he not being bullied and crying about it?
Exactly. It doesn't change the fact that he was bullied, and this is kind of what's at the heart of the story, is that people essentially felt like they had been tricked into feeling empathy for someone whose family may be hardcore right-wing Trump voting
so he wasn't
Confederate
the
flag
perfect
wavers.
victim.
Exactly.
And Justin Bieber must have felt like such an idiot for
Yeah,
capitalising
and
on
I
it.
think I would say for me it's the incredible amount of anger that this discovery provoked. I think it's probably motivated by two things. One is that people are incredibly angry when they feel like they've been charitable and generous and that they were, somehow duped into showing that kind of goodwill. And then also because people did share a lot of their own feelings about personal painful experiences from being bullied, they felt that double anger of, well, I made myself vulnerable and now I wish I hadn't because, I was tricked.
Well, far be it from me to apportion blame. I'll give that responsibility to Cameron.
Good.
Who's to blame?
Well, I think if you look at this, I think it's a bit ridiculous that people would feel almost shameful for sharing their experiences with Keaton, because at the end of the day, the video is about him being bullied, and it's not about his Confederate supporting parents. But I think what wound people up as well is that his family set up a GoFundMe page to support him and raise money for him, and I think that's what really kind of was the nail in the coffin.
But people contributed to that fund voluntarily. I mean, it's a slightly odd thing anyway, isn't it? Why is a kid getting bullied in need of money anyway?
Yeah, I think that's the stain on it, really. It's what's the money going to do to support a bullied child, unless it went to a bullying charity. But I think that was really soured when obviously they found out that he had Confederate supporting parents.
And do we know that it was his family that set up that GoFundMe page?
It was his father, I believe.
No, it was.
No.
It was.
Oh, see?
No,
This is
I
the
think
thing,
it was a
isn't it?
random,
It was
random stranger who
A
did it.
stranger set it up, but his mother had said that
Fake
she would
news,
support
Cameron
it.
Tate, fake news.
Yeah.
This is the thing, isn't it? Like,
This-
details of the
this is the
story float
problem.
around and it's not clear
Essentially,
what's true and what
For
isn't.
me, this is what makes this a kind of an important story with, repercussions into the future, is that I think it shows the hair trigger of the internet. As like Cam was saying, setting up a GoFundMe is a pretty ill thought out way to support a bullied boy whose family aren't necessarily in any financial hardship, but people immediately wanted to do something, and then when they turned, it was that exact same energy went into hating him and to, digging through his family's history online. Which of us can say that if someone, if we had hundreds of thousands of strangers examining everything we've ever posted online, would any of us be the perfect victim to support?
Well, I think Arion would be.
Holden, I was going to nominate. I think I read somewhere that I think, in fact, The Guardian described this as the most 2017 story of 2017. And it does have all of the elements, doesn't
Again,
it? Like,
fake news, Arion. I read that article this morning. The Guardian journalist said within the article that one wag had said it was the most 2017
Right.
story of
Okay,
2017.
well,
So in fact, she was quoting someone else.
in any case,
Very important to get the facts right here.
I think the thing that is sort of at the heart of the story is this sort of quest for, I don't know, redemption after a quite difficult year, and the creation of just it felt, at least when it broke, like there was a desire among people to just feel good about something. And unfortunately, we live in a nuanced world, and nothing is going to be as simply black and white as we might hope it is. And this quest for heroes and villains, and we're in the process of putting together our list of the heroes and villains of 2017.
Oh, excellent. When's that going to be published?
Probably in the next week. But actually, even in talking about the potential nominees for those prizes,
I mean, I can
such
think of
as they
plenty
are.
who could be in both categories. That's the
The
thing,
only
isn't it?
person that we could find who is sort of, we could all universally agree
Don't
with.
say David Attenborough.
Oh no, sorry, I was going to go with the villain, which was
okay.
Harvey Weinstein.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Though, let's hope that.
By the way, I
David
don't mean to
Attenborough
diss
stays.
David Attenborough, so David should be in your list. I'm just saying it's a bit obvious.
Probably on the heroes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll probably put him there.
If you named him biggest villain of the year
Well, let's
for
go
selling
through.
DVDs
let's
whilst
just go through
promoting
his
climate
complete-
change agenda, that would be great.
Yeah,
I'd
let's
enjoy
just-
that story.
I think we should just go back and have a look through his Twitter feed before we're willing to put him in one category or the other.
Does he really love the Galapagos, though?
Well, I think what the story really reminds us, and something that I think, really need to remember more than ever, is that the internet is an incredibly powerful, untrammeled force. Even when we're summoning the internet together to do something that we think is good, by placing that amount of basically unscrutinized scrutiny on any individual person, if the internet finds something they don't like, that incredible tidal wave of force can turn against you. And there is no one who can really protect you. John Ronson wrote that book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, where he spoke to people whose lives had essentially been ruined by being shamed on social media. There was a woman who tweeted about going to Africa and getting AIDS, and it went viral, and she now can't get a job. When that force is turned against you, it really can completely destroy your life. And I'm sure that Keaton Jones is far more traumatized than what's happened now than he was by some schoolyard bullies.
And it's particularly brutal for him because he's being tainted by the actions, as we mentioned before, of his parents. He had nothing to do with what they had put online and what they had tattooed on their bodies in the case of his white supremacist father. But, this is not his fault. And yet he's going to be massively
Today,
affected by
he
it.
was still bullied.
Right.
And the incredible thing that people can withdraw their empathy based on factors that don't really impact on his situation
one
at
thing
all.
you could argue is, yes, he was bullied, and yes, those tears were real, I believe that. Why was his mum filming it in the first place? Like, he's now got to the stage where it's just so accepted that we share every detail of our lives on social media that maybe it is an explicable phenomenon, but it's a bit odd, isn't it?
That's exactly what I thought as soon as I saw it went online. And when I saw the almost immediate pouring out of love from celebrities, I thought, just wait, because there will be a caveat. And because there always is with these kind of things. It was following remember the Boston bomber attack during the marathon? And there were loads of photos that came out of that with just fake stories attached to them. And you have to wait to see what's going to happen within the next few days. And that's exactly what happened in this case.
Yeah, and there's a push within the news industry to get information out as soon as possible. And I think that is exacerbated, and like the lag times are even shorter on Twitter, where stories happen instantly. And you want to be able to form those snap judgments on person good, person bad, but actually it's much more difficult than we would like to think to do that.
But I think it desensitizes us as well to when these stories come up, because that's... I looked at that and I saw a child crying, and I feel like a real heartless person for kind of going, there's got to be a bigger story behind this. And I think that's going to happen. These fake stories, all these stories that there's more to it than what meets the eye, we're going to get desensitized at the end of the day.
And you think about, I mean, he's an 11-year-old boy. If he was auditioning to be on America's Got Talent, there would be a team of therapists behind the scenes.
Right.
There'd be counsellors, there'd be lawyers, making sure that he's protected before he's suddenly foisted on the worldwide public as a star. And yet, if you come through Facebook and Twitter, the same thing happens. Justin Bieber was talking about him within 24 hours of him crying in the back of his mum's car. No one seems to care what that might do to the brain of an 11-year-old.
Yeah, it's just like a whirlwind. It comes through, it chews you up, spits you out, and then, ordinary people are left with very dramatically changed lives. He's now got hundreds, if not thousands, of news articles online attached to him and attached to this story. I mean, it's not going to go away. I just think that cases like this are going to become even more prevalent in the future. And in a world where everyone is living more of their lives online, being at the heart of a viral story is not going to be, a quirky anecdote from your past. It's going to be what ends up defining you.
Next up, it's Arion. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
I think this will be remembered as the week we laid the ghost of the Japan ghost ships mystery to rest.
A mysterious wooden boat washes up on a desolate Japanese beach. Inside, a grisly discovery: 8 skeletons. Japanese officials strongly suspect they were North Koreans.
They don't have great navigation capabilities and equipment and lost their way.
This boat, with lights rigged up reportedly to attract squid, was found recently with several desperate North Korean survivors on board. On some vessels, the Japanese Coast Guard has found survivors, alive but emaciated, lying among the dead.
Brian Todd there reporting for CNN this week. So Arion, explain what these ghost ships are and how we got here.
In fact, the ghost ship that they're talking about with 8 skeletons aboard washed up last week in a place called Miyazawa Beach, which is in the north of the South Island of Japan. But this week, on Tuesday, another boat also emerged with 3 dead bodies on it, and it came to shore in a place called Fukaura, which is just around the corner from the other beach. But it's been going on for the whole year. There's been a bunch of these boats that have emerged, many of them with dead bodies, if not skeletons aboard, and only occasionally with survivors.
And this is apparently the fallout of North Korea's missile tests.
This is the theory of some analysts, that it is the retaliatory measures that are being taken by the UN and the international community to put sanctions on North Korea as a result of their nuclear missile testing program. And what this has done is made the populations much more desperate than they have even been for the last couple of decades.
So they're not trying to escape, they're trying to fish.
So some of them are trying to fish, and they're going deeper into international waters to do so, and they're not necessarily the best trained fisher people, so they're getting themselves into trouble, and then their boats wash up on the shores of Japan.
So let's take that hypothesis as read then. And Rebecca, if that is true, is it the international community's fault? Do we have to take responsibility for these deaths?
I find it a really interesting consideration, really, because I don't think that we often mull the impact or the moral justification for sanctions on an everyday basis, especially when everyone is so against North Korea as a regime, would like to see it, fall or evolve into something more democratic. But at the same time, I think the moral justification for sanctions that harms the population is the idea that this stands a good chance of bringing about long-term reform. With North Korea, I don't think we have any reason to think that that's the case. Sanctions have never had, a serious effect on the regime's integrity before. And the famine of the 1990s didn't push North Korea to reach out to the international community. And, it's believed that possibly millions of people died in that famine. They aren't going to respond to these sanctions. So it does make me wonder if we do have any moral justification.
And in fact, some people say that the opening up of markets and providing opportunities for people within North Korea that aren't based on handouts from the government and that kind of governmental support breaks that relationship that's taking place in the country between this benefactor, cult of personality leader and the people, to the exclusion of any understanding of the world around them and any interaction with the world around them. So there is an argument that has been put up to say the more we can provide opportunities, and particularly financial opportunities, to the people of North Korea, the more chance they will have to break with the oppression of the Kims.
What does that look like, though, actually? How do you provide a financial opportunity to the people of North Korea?
Already, as I understand it, Kim Jong-un has been involved in not exactly the same sort of thing that's going on in China in kind of creating new opportunities for capitalism to flourish, but an opening out and an accepting of the fact that people do need to trade. And so within North Korea, there's much more leeway being offered to people to be able to do their own.
But that is never going to fly in a presidential speech, is it? I mean, even taking Trump out of the equation, no Western leader's going to stand up and say, the man is creating a missile that is pointed at my country and my response is, let's trade with them.
I think not. And I think that
sanctions have to be better than war. Those were the two options, right?
Yeah, and sanctions are often thought of as that midpoint between diplomacy and war. And so if you don't have sanctions, what other levers have you got?
You know, because they're unlikely to affect change, sanctions are, you know, largely symbolic. It's a way for the international community to continually express its disapproval of North Korea. But for a country that relies on the population not being able to get access to information about the outside world, isolation isn't really a punishment. I mean, obviously, from an economic perspective, they would obviously like to see more leeway. But, you know, from a cultural, social perspective, it's not really doing any damage to the North Korean regime to be completely cut off from the international community.
Cameron.
But it's interesting, if you were to remove some of those sanctions and you were to bring a greater trade to North Korea, it would cause almost a paradox, really, because you have such a closed nation it tries to make its population oblivious to the outside world. And then if you've got Western influence coming in, I can't see how that would work even slightly.
I think also the argument in favor of sanctions is that they have to be properly universally enforced, and we know that China continues to trade with North Korea even though there are these sanctions in place. And equally, they can be better targeted. So, for example, in Russia, the Maginski Act served to introduce sanctions on particular groups of people, specifically the oligarchs surrounding the Putin regime, so that even if they weren't harming Putin himself, they were hurting him via his friends and cronies who would then advocate for change within the country. It's not clear how you could do that in North Korea, unfortunately, because you just don't have that group of wealthy people who are swanning about buying up London property and living the high life and sending their kids to Harrow and Eton. So it's not clear how you could stop them from living the life that they have become accustomed to, because it's all so hermetically sealed that it's hard to hurt them in that way. But it's not clear what the alternatives are for the international community.
And if it isn't to do with sanctions, if the ghost ships are actually caused by other things, what might they be? I read that one theory is that the North Korean military might have learnt to fish. Explain that.
I think it's hard to discount the sanctions argument, but I think other factors may also be contributing to the problem. And yes, recently Kim Jong-un decided that the North Korean military would be able to raise more money for itself if it did fishing expeditions. And so he's allowed a certain number of soldiers to get into small boats and go out and fish, and they're not very well trained. The other theory is that, the other contributing factor rather, is that North Korea recently sold off a bunch of its fishing waters surrounding the country to China. So again, even its trained fishermen and women, are having to go further afield to get fish, which is taking them closer to Japan.
There are claims that they've been illegally fishing in Japanese waters as well. So it's not even international waters. They are in Japan.
So, you know, Japan has many reasons to not be totally happy in its neighborhood, but one of them is certainly that, there's fishing encroaching on its territorial waters.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about whether or not, you know, the sanctions are having an impact on the population and driving them to take these desperate measures. But one of the ghost ships that washed up recently, I think it was 2 survivors on board, and they were very insistent that they were not refugees and that they wanted to be returned to North Korea. Now, like, we don't know why they've said that, because, you know, we've heard before from defectors that there can be consequences for family and friends left behind. But at the same time, it's so interesting that boats full of what look like emaciated bodies and skeletons washing up, and then these survivors wash up on Japan, and basically the first thing they say is, we don't want to escape, we want to go back to North Korea. I mean, I don't know, it adds a certain... I mean, I think some of the mystery is still there.
Yes, I think so. And I think that, like every other story we're going to talk about, it's not going to be so simple that everyone in North Korea hates being in North Korea. One of the simple facts of the country is that we just don't have a clear view of what it's like to be a North Korean citizen. And I'm sure not everyone is suffering, and certainly not everyone disagrees with the regime. So, yeah, that could well fit into the theory that we've put forward, but equally, you're right. We haven't solved the mysteries of North Korea.
You and your nuance. It's not what it's about. Cameron, you're our final entry on today's agenda. What is your story of the week?
Well, it looks like Trump's gunning for a position in the Rocket Man Club.
The directive I'm signing today will refocus America's space program on human exploration and discovery. It marks an important step in returning American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use. This time, we will not only plant our flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond.
President Donald Trump, you keep saying it, but it still doesn't sound right, signing off a declaration to send Americans back to the moon and beyond.
And beyond.
Cameron, why is this your unreported story of the week?
Isn't this just such a massive surprise? This could arguably be one of the biggest announcements, not only of the year, but arguably the decade, of an American president declaring that he's going to increase efforts to return us back to not only the moon, but beyond. It's a massive talking point at the moment. Apart from nobody's really talking about it. And there are multiple reasons as for why this is an underreported story. The first is Trump's plans are incredibly vague. It's essentially an order calling for the public and private sector to work together to get us back into space. But we don't really know how he's going to do that, funding-wise or anything, really.
Why else do you think people aren't bonding with this news?
I wonder if it's because they just don't believe him. And I think that we've watched now successive presidents kind of dip their toes in the water of interstellar exploration. But for Trump, you know, it's just an obvious PR coup if he can stand up and say this. But actually, as Cameron's saying, he's got no meat behind it. There's no coherence.
There's cash, isn't there? That's the point. I mean, does there need to be meat behind it? Why does he need to say anything other than, I'm going to reverse some of the decisions that were made under the previous administration to take away funding, and I'm going to restore funding to NASA?
Well, but as I understand it...
He's got other funding to NASA, I know that, but... You know, nonetheless, he's saying, let's have a space program.
Obama
again.
also funded a space program, so what he's announcing is just
Obama funded a much reduced space program, though, didn't he? And then the ambition was never, let's go back to the moon, because we've been to the moon.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tremendously expensive, and on one level, it's a surprise for Trump to kind of resurrect this slightly moribund piece of American adventurism to the moon. But on the other hand, I think it fits in perfectly with what Trump's all about, making America great again. I mean, he talks about
us the 1960s.
Yeah, he talks about 1972, but what he's really talking about is 1969. You know, Americans on the moon before everything got really complicated, and women wanted to be paid equally, and all the minorities wanted to assert their rights. You know, it's a time that America still looks, and I think is probably the tail end of, like, you know, the classic mid-century greatness of America before any, as we were saying, it's all been all about nuance in this episode. before American history and society suddenly started becoming nuanced, you know, this was the end of that era of exceptionalism, and he's just trying to key into people's, you know, even people who weren't there at the time, that cultural memory of America leading the world.
Well, I think you could argue that it is a ploy of Trump trying to improve his public image. I mean, we all remember that speech from JFK of when he announced that he was sending people to the moon.
And that was a better speech.
It was such a better speech. It was, it really got together not only America, but arguably most of the Western world. People really got behind America. And it almost seems like Trump just woke up one morning and went, I think I'm going to return back to the moon today.
Well, I think the thing is, like I say, we have been to the moon. Mars would be good, wouldn't it? But that's the thing where people have a big question mark. I mean, I was listening to him saying we're not going to just put our flag down on the moon anymore, and not thinking what he intended, which is we're going to, bring back scientific research that will further mankind, but actually thinking, what are you going to put there, a Trump casino?
Well, there are benefits, and the biggest benefit is essentially establishing a mining facility on the moon. Now, this sounds really sci-fi, but there are a lot of minerals on there, such as iridium. There's quite a lot of iridium. If they found a feasible way of going backwards and forwards to the moon, which I think they could do with the support of the private sector, especially with Elon Musk's SpaceX, you might be able to find a way of basically mining the moon and making money from that.
But I think what you've just said also is another really important reason why people maybe were less interested in what Trump had to say on the question of space exploration than they might have been in listening to previous presidents, which is because we're no longer so convinced that states, the United States among them, but any states are going to be leading on the exploration of space. What's actually happening is that the process is being led by the private sector. And you've got Elon Musk with SpaceX, and you've got Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin, and Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic. So, and these projects, we can see the fruits of them. You can see their rockets actually contributing. You can see Elon Musk, not personally, but docking with the International Space Station.
And they are making huge gains in this area. We really could be visiting Mars. I'm not sure if I agree with Musk's claim of landing on Mars in 2022, but I do see it happening around the 2030 period. I think what they kind of raise the question for me is, we have the private sector that's doing that. Government should really be backing climate change, and I think this is another ploy that Trump is doing to divert people's attention away from his hatred to the idea that we might be harming the environment.
Well, it's popular science, isn't it, space exploration? So it feels like you're funding science, whereas actually, in a way, what he's doing is cutting science or investing in very easy to write about science, which is a slightly different thing.
Well, I mean, technically, you invest in NASA, you are investing in improving the world, because there's a lot of technologies that can be derived from space exploration. I don't know how much of that can be applied to improving the climate, though.
Climate change is hard and it makes you feel bad, and space makes you feel good. So that's
also hard.
But it's also hard. But we don't have to worry about it. We just have to watch it on TV while great American astronauts launch into space to quasi-colonize new planets. It's all about optics, and it's about distracting people from issues that are actually complicated and that Trump does fail on spectacularly in public on the world stage on a regular basis. It's like a simple one-liner, let's go back to the moon. And I think that's going to play well with a pretty large segment of America.
I mean, I'd watch it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, who wouldn't watch a rocket going to the moon?
Exactly.
Still.
Well, exactly. Well,
it's basically like a really good episode of The Apprentice, actually, isn't it, when you think about it?
Which is his entire presidency.
There you go.
But Trump is known for actually following up on his orders. I mean, look at the travel ban. That's something that he got to work on straight away. So while it almost seems like a bit of a joke that he's come out with this, there is a good chance that he could follow up on this.
And it was a campaign pledge.
It was. Yes, it was. Yes, it was indeed. So we won't really know how much NASA is going to get until February when the budget is announced. So at the moment, I think that's why we have a lot of vagueness. But we really could be America and American citizens could be going back to space very soon.
Well, whether they go back to the moon or to Mars, I mean, my big question is, where are they going to put the American embassy? I think that's what we're going to have to petition Trump about. That is it for this edition of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks to Rebecca Gillie, Cameron Tait, and Arion McNicoll. For more from The Week, why not visit theweek.co.uk, where you can also sign up to our free email newsletter, The Weekday, or you can have the magazine delivered direct to your door. Just head to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. All the past episodes of the show are available on our podcast feed. Just search for The Week Unwrapped on your app of choice. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.